Welcome into episode 12 of Awakening the Ordinary. My name is Daniel Clower, and boy, oh boy, have I got some news to share with you. In this week's episode, we are going to be talking about the big, beautiful bill. We're also going to be talking about Harvard University and its ongoing war with President Trump. We'll be talking about Star Wars in real life, but way less fun. And then finally, I'm going to be introducing a brand new segment this week. I hope to make it a weekly segment that I am affectionately referring to as a cabinet full of cuckoos. And it's where I'm going to be taking a little bit of a look into some of the Trump officials and why they are not just bad choices, but how they are uniquely unqualified and, in some cases, cartoonishly evil choices for their respective positions. But without further ado, we got to dive into this bill. And first things first, I just want to clarify, just for the record here, it is actually officially called the Big Beautiful Bill Act. That's what's on its birth certificate. That's its government name. So just let that sink in for a second. But generally speaking, this is a budget bill. Budget bill. So it is supposed to be about the budget and the debt ceiling in general. I have already talked a little bit about some of the implications that it has for healthcare. You can actually check out the previous episode for that. I basically explained how they are essentially taking a chainsaw to Medicare and Medicaid, and it is to pay off, in part, an absolutely massive and insane tax cut to not just the wealthy, but the ultra wealthy. I want to dive a little deeper into some of the financials and some of the financial impacts that this bill could have. And then afterwards, I want to talk about some of the more insidious aspects of this bill, because as I said, it is a budget bill, and that is with air quotes for those of you listening, because there are some interesting and completely unrelated things that they have snuck in some cases last minute and in secret midnight meetings that we got to dive into. So based on this bill, if you make under $50,000, you're actually going to be paying more in taxes. And I know what you're thinking. That don't sound right. It sounds a little backwards. And yeah, you're right. It completely is. Anybody making above $50,000 will receive some level of tax break. It ranges from, a couple of bucks, couple of $100 at the lower ends to literally thousands and thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars at the highest amounts. To break it down into more real numbers for you, the median income for all of the workers in the United States is $42,220. So that means that half of the people that are employed make less than that, and half of the people that are employed make more than that. 42.5% of households in the United States had an income under $50,000. And these numbers are generally speaking from 2023, because this is kind of the most up-to-date information that we have the entire year for. That is all just to say that basically, even if you are doing pretty well for yourself, even if you are making more than 50,000, significantly more than 50,000, even if you think all of your friends and family are, you have to understand that that's not the case for a huge percentage of this country. The median worker was making less than $42,220. That means half of workers. So half of all of the people that work make less than that. And yes, that does include part-time work. That does include, gig work and stuff like that. But that's the amount of money that they're making in a year. So their taxes are going to be going up. And obviously, if you are making lower income like that, every dollar counts. So it hurts people that make a lower amount disproportionately more to take money out of their pocket. People who are making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, millions of dollars a year, can afford to lose out a little bit on taxes. They can afford to pay more. It's not going to hurt them in any meaningful way. It may make their savings look like a little less. It may make their portfolio go down a little bit, but it's not going to have a real, like, genuine, solid impact on them. For people who are making under that median amount, that could mean they have to give up a meal. And that definitely will mean that they're not going to be stimulating the economy as much by spending money at restaurants, spending money at toy stores, spending money on anything extraneous, anything extra that they can possibly cut out. They're going to have to. Now, it is harder to find firm numbers on this next topic because it's not as cut and dry as how much money do you make. That is something that you can look up. There are official records for it. The IRS tracks that because they have to for the purposes of tax collection. But in the research that I've done, it looks like the vast majority of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, or at the very least are within 2 paychecks of essentially being homeless, not being able to make their mortgage payment, not being able to make their rent payment. Surveys range anywhere from about in the mid 40s to the 70% ranges of people that report living paycheck to paycheck. And I am sure that varies region to region, of course. Obviously, if you're looking in, the tech sector of California, there are probably less people that are on the brink of homelessness that are answering these surveys than if you ask somebody in, the rural South. But I just want to kind of paint the picture for you that this is affecting huge swaths of people. It's not like it's only going to be affecting, a few people here or there, some minor percentage of people, some, couple in a community or anything like that. It's going to affect a lot of people. And the odds are that it's going to be affecting somebody that you know personally. In the United States, there's a big taboo about talking about personal finances. You're really not supposed to tell people how much you make or how much you have in your savings account. It's taboo. You're not supposed to talk about it. So most people are not going to be telling you if they are living paycheck to paycheck or if they are 2 paychecks away from being homeless. So even if you think, it's not really going to affect anybody I know, I'm telling you, think again, because I shared the statistics, the median income, like this is affecting people, even if they haven't been open with you about it or talked with you about it. The next thing I want to dive into a little bit is the budgetary aspect of it. I talked about how it might affect you personally financially, how it's going to affect your community in some ways, even if you don't know exactly. But I want to talk about how this is going to affect our nation as a whole. And while I'm talking about this stuff, I just want you to keep in mind that Republicans talk a big talk about being fiscally responsible. They talk a big talk about wanting to slash spending. And yes, in some aspects of this bill, they are cutting spending, in some ways very steeply, and on things like Medicare and Medicaid that you probably don't want them to cut. But they are also adding plenty of spending. And they are also raising our debt ceiling by trillions of dollars. I'm sure I'm going to, at some point, be diving into this topic a little deeper when I inevitably make some more videos about my journey from, true blue conservatism to being more of a moderate. But one of the things that has always deeply bothered me about Republicans is they talk about wanting to be fiscally responsible, cutting spending. They talk about how the amount of debt we're in is just outrageous and it has to stop. But if you look at the amount of debt that every president has taken on ever since Bill Clinton was in office, you'll see that he was actually the last president that balanced the budget. Significantly more debt has been added by Republicans than Democrats. So for all their talk of being fiscally responsible, if you look at the actual data and you look at the actual facts, you'll see that that's all it is. It's just talk. So, yes, they are adding $5 trillion to the debt ceiling. And the vast majority of that is coming from giving insane tax breaks to the ultra wealthiest among us, to people that absolutely can afford to pay their fair share without taking a meaningful hit to their standards of living. I will just quickly, briefly mention it here because I already discussed it again at length, but they're going to be cutting somewhere around $800 billion from Medicare and Medicaid over the next 10 years. Some of this is going to be in just outright funding cuts, just taking money away. And some of it is going to come from scaling back the Affordable Health Care Act, Obamacare, which has been the only way that many Americans have been able to get any kind of health care ever since it was passed. And some of it is going to be by implementing work requirements. And I have talked with people already in my comment section and in real life who are all for this. I get it. You think people should have to work. They shouldn't be getting these free handouts from the government. But studies show that 90% of people that are on Medicaid are either already working or they have a legitimate reason to not be able to work. For example, they are disabled, or they are the sole caretaker of children, or they're a student in school. So I'm not sure how many of you viewers have tried to navigate the labyrinthine hell that is trying to do government paperwork, trying to get a government worker on the phone to explain a situation or just get any kind of administrative work done whatsoever with the government, but it's awful. I literally spoke to insurance companies for a living for years, and I would do that 10 out of 10 times over trying to get a call done to any government agency. It's bad. And it's going to be getting worse, by the way, because again, Doge came in and started absolutely slashing personnel. So first of all, for people that are actually already eligible, that are not working currently, you're adding this extra stressor onto their plate. You are making them jump through hoops to prove that they should be on Medicaid, even though they're not working for X, Y, and Z. So just for a second, imagine that you have a chronic disability, or that you are a severely overworked and overstressed caretaker. And now all of a sudden you have to spend hours and hours filling out paperwork, getting on the phone with people just to keep the status quo. Part of the hope that they have in implementing these work requirements is that people who legitimately should be on Medicaid fall off of it because they can't jump through the hoops. That's kind of the unspoken dark secret about it. And again, this is people who already fulfill the requirements of having a disability, being a full-time caretaker, being a full-time student. I mean, can you imagine trying to juggle dealing with finals and also doing this horrendous paperwork? And you have to do it over and over and over again. And now consider the people that are actually working. Sure, if you've got just a regular 9-to-5 full-time W-2 job, it will probably be pretty easy. You can probably just submit your pay stubs or whatever and no problem. And that's, again, only hopefully. But keep in mind that the work requirements that they're implementing are 80 hours a month. And that's not 80 hours a month on average. So it's not like you can 1 month work 90 hours and then another month work 75 and you're okay. No, it is every single month you have to prove that you worked at least 80 hours. And yes, by the way, this also includes if it's through no fault of your own. So even if, for example, your employer just didn't schedule you enough hours, that's not your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. They maybe had told you the whole time that they'd be giving you enough hours. Maybe they sent you home early one day because it was slow, and all of a sudden, you're screwed. You didn't hit that requirement. And that's not to mention there are plenty of people that run their own business. Hop onto the neighborhood app, hop onto your local neighborhood Facebook group, and I guarantee you, you are going to see plenty of people offering things like landscaping services, gardening, lawn mowing, whatever. How are these people supposed to prove how much work they did in an hourly setting? I'm sure they can't just promise, yeah, I did it. I did 80 hours, I swear. They're going to have to document it somehow. And who is going to be investigating and following up on that? Who's going to be making sure that the hours that they documented, they did actually work and they're not, committing some kind of fraud or something like that? Because again, we are slashing personnel. They are firing thousands and thousands of people and now expecting them to process massive amounts of paperwork for people to prove that they were working at least 80 hours a week. So what? People can just turn in paperwork saying that they worked their own personal business 80 hours that month, and that's totally fine. And there doesn't need to be any follow-up or investigation or anything like that. I mean, if that's the case, what was even the point of the work requirements to begin with? And what if it's a slow season? What if, it's a drought and they haven't gotten any rain and it's a dry month and so there's not a lot of landscaping to be done? That's not their fault. They're trying to work. They're trying to go out there and be productive citizens. But guess what? You're out of luck because Congress arbitrarily decided that you have to work 80 hours or you don't deserve to be healthy anymore. And God forbid you get hurt or something halfway through the month, because then you have to fill out forms to show a change in circumstances, and you have to hope that they process all of that in time before the hospital starts hounding you for money that you don't have because you couldn't work, and they kicked you off of Medicaid for it. They said you don't deserve to be healthy. And by the way, it's not like you're exempt if you are laid off or if you're fired, which, again, I mean, that's not really your fault. Frequently, of course, sometimes people do, they mess around, they get fired, whatever. But in this economy, with these tariffs that the Orange guys implemented, businesses are closing like crazy. And if you're getting laid off, well, that's too bad. You're not fulfilling the work requirements. You're kicked off of Medicaid. So, again, I get the intention, okay? The intention that able-bodied people should be giving back to their community and being productive members of society. And if they are choosing to not do that for whatever reason, okay, I understand where you're coming from. You might have good intentions, but the road to hell was always paved with good intentions. And I'm telling you, these congressional members, they know better. They don't have good intentions. They are hoping, genuinely and legitimately hoping, that people that are eligible for Medicaid fall off of it because they weren't able to do the correct paperwork. That is their fervent desire because that's how they're planning on saving money. So enough about the Medicare, Medicaid stuff. I have talked you to death about that. It is a big, serious, important issue, and I hope you take it seriously. And I hope you understand that it's not just a bunch of freeloaders that are going to get hurt off of this. It is real people who are going to be suffering and maybe dying because of this. But we're done with that topic for now. The next way that this big, bad bill is looking to cut spending is by redefining what a child is. And yeah, I'm not kidding about that. See, if you know one thing about children, it's that they like to eat. And food, by the way, is pretty expensive. SNAP, aka food stamps, is a program that gives needy family money specifically to be able to buy food and food products. You are given money per household dependent. I'm sitting here like some kind of an idiot because I'm talking to you guys about the stock market and treasury bonds and crypto and financial stuff. And this whole time, I got a little freeloader sitting here in my house, not even paying me rent. I'm about to go shake down my 8-year-old after I'm done recording this video. Trump told me I can. But seriously, if you don't see an issue with lowering the dependent age from 18 to 7, I don't even know what to tell you. This is a pretty short segment here because there are things that are complicated and nuanced and you really got to dive in and, kind of figure out where the middle ground is. And then there's, I think 10-year-olds don't deserve to eat food. I mean, are we going back to the Industrial Revolution? Are we going to start shoving children in chimneys to clean them? Like, what is going on here? This is not America as I have known it. And this is in no way making America great again. But, okay, I think I have talked enough for today about the financial aspects of all of this bill. There is certainly more to dive into, like raising the budget for the Department of Defense by billions, while also needing to pay an estimated $1 billion to retrofit this free $400 million plane that Qatar is giving us. But I have other stuff that I want to move on to, and we could be talking about the financial aspects of this bill for hours and hours and hours. But before I can entirely move on from this bill, there are two specific provisions that are examples of some non-budgetary things that they are sneaking into this bill. And I just want to make sure that you're aware of what's going on behind the scenes. This is, after all, a big bill. It's in the name. And I don't know if you guys remember this, but back in the day, back when they were going to be passing the Affordable Health Care Act, Nancy Pelosi kind of infamously said that we needed to pass the ACA before we could know what was in it. They said that it was like an oligarchy, it was like a dictatorship or whatever, and they roasted her for it. And look, kind of rightfully so. Like, what are you talking about? Everybody should be able to know what's in a bill before it gets passed. That is transparency. That is democracy. But Republicans are basically doing the same thing now with this bill, and it's because they know that this is their shot. They're not really going to have another shot to pass any kind of major legislation before they have to start ramping up for midterms. Primaries are going to be coming up sooner than you think, and they're going to try and pack everything that they possibly can into this one bill because they want to be able to do damage control later. So pack in all the bad stuff, pack in all the unpopular stuff right now, because people have short memories. And if they can pass it all now, they can distract you with other stuff later, and you won't even be thinking about it when it comes time for primaries, and especially when it comes time for midterm elections. So with that being said, can somebody please explain to me how this fits into a budget bill? I'm going to quote it here. No court of the United States may use appropriated funds to enforce a contempt citation for failure to comply with an injunction or temporary restraining order if no security was given when the injunction order was issued. That's a mouthful. Those words were added overnight without being publicly debated on the floor. They might not have been talked about at all other than in some kind of secret backroom committee. But what does it actually mean? Courts are not going to be able to punish an entity or person for not following a court order unless they collected a bond beforehand when it was issued. So what does that actually mean? Well, the Trump administration so far in the first 100 days has been pretty well known for essentially disagreeing with the judicial branch pretty loudly and then not following through with judicial orders, even from the Supreme Court. They constantly try to enact unlawful executive orders and basically just kind of try and break the law in like wacky and zany ways that sometimes are outright illegal and sometimes are declared unconstitutional by a court afterwards. Now, thankfully, most of the time so far, they have been stopped. Courts have issued injunctions on them, which means that basically they're telling them to knock it off. Don't do that thing because it's illegal or it's unconstitutional or whatever. It's just not right. You're not allowed to do it. Don't do it. And then inevitably, the administration will almost always try and appeal it, and it'll end up going to the Supreme Court. And then thankfully, most of the time, the Supreme Court will then tell them to stop it. Don't do that thing. It's bad. But why does it matter what the Supreme Court is saying? If the court says, hey, don't do that thing, that's a bad thing and you shouldn't do it, and then the government just continues to do it anyway, they can be held in contempt of court. So specific individuals, whatever government officials are enabling this behavior or affecting this behavior, can actually be held in contempt of court and taken to jail. And that makes sense, right? I mean, the court system says this is the law. And when you break the law, you are held to account for it until you make it right. But what this specific legislation is saying is that if they didn't order you to pay a bond when they ordered you to not do the thing that you want to do, you can't be held in contempt. You basically can't be punished for it. And when the court orders the US government to do something, they don't require a bond. So essentially, to put a really fine point on it and explain it in extremely simple and basic terms, Congress is trying to write a law that essentially says that the government can honestly just do whatever the hell it wants and nobody can stop them. And I mean that like sincerely and literally. This is an act saying that the president is above the law, that the executive branch just does not have to listen to the judicial branch anymore. Take a journey with me for a second. Let's stretch the absolute bounds of your imagination and really reach deep into the recesses of your mind, because I want to present a fantastical scenario to you. Imagine for 1 second that the Trump administration wanted to break the law. Maybe, for example, they decide they want to just start deporting people with no due process, or even proof that they are not supposed to be deported to whatever country they were sent to. In this wacky and zany and nigh unimaginable scenario that would surely never happen, the courts step in and say, stop it, get some help. Well, then imagine the Trump administration just says, no, I'm good. Thanks for your opinion. I'm going to go ahead and just keep doing what I want to do. And I don't really care what you say. Well, in our current timeline, if that happened, wink, wink, if they were that open and brazen about it, eventually they would be threatened with being held in contempt of court. If you just outright say, no, I'm good, I'm going to go ahead and just not follow your court order, I really don't care what you have to say, then you would be held in contempt of court. So whatever official was affecting this, whatever administration official was brazenly just not following the court order, would be held in contempt of court until they started following the order. In the new timeline, where this big bastardized bill gets passed, what happens? The answer is nothing. Nothing happens at all. They can just do whatever they want. And the court can say, that's bad. And Congress can say, that's bad. Because all of a sudden there is no more accountability. And that's bad. That is bad that the Trump administration could just brazenly and openly just decide they want to break the law and not be held accountable. But it's also even scarier for another reason. Donald Trump is a tricky guy. Tricky Dick, you might call him, because he's a trickster. And he never really openly says he's not going to follow the law. He actually always says he is going to follow the law, and then he just sometimes doesn't. But he says he's going to. And unfortunately, a lot of people, a lot of Republicans and MAGA supporters basically just take him at his word. And they don't even really kind of follow up to look and see what he actually does. He says he's going to follow the law. They say, okay, yeah, Trump said he's going to follow the law. Like, you know, what's the problem here? Then later he breaks the law and crickets. They don't ever follow up. Well, as it stands right now, that's what he's doing. I mean, he's gotten on TV and he says, yeah, of course, we're going to respect the Supreme Court. We're going to follow what the law says. We're going to make sure we follow through with whatever requirements they give. And then he's just not doing that. I mean, they ordered him to effect the return of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. He's not doing that. He said he absolutely can with a single phone call, and he's just not doing it. He said he would follow the law. He's not following the law. Right now, if you ask MAGA supporters, they will tell you he is, because he said he is. So because he's not following the law right now, in this timeline, before the bill gets passed, he and his administration have been threatened with being held in contempt. Multiple judges have already talked about it. And if he was in some way, he or his administration was actually held in contempt, that would be big news. Suddenly, people would start to realize, wait a second, maybe he's not following the law. Maybe he lied about following the law. He said he was going to, but now he's being held in contempt of court for not doing it. So maybe he's a liar. It would be a signal even to people who are not at all like politically inclined or plugged in that something is wrong here. Something is going wrong. But if there is never any threat of that ever happening, if nobody can actually ever be held in contempt of court for not following court orders, they can claim whatever they want and then just not be held legally accountable for it. And at that point, many people who are not plugged in, who are not following up on the president's actions, are simply going to think that everything's fine. If they can't be held legally accountable for breaking the law and not following court orders, then what can we do? And I'm going to be talking about this later on in the episode, but we are genuinely inching closer and closer and closer to literal tyranny, to an actual dictatorship. And a move like this, where they pass a law saying that nobody can be held legally accountable, essentially, for not following court orders, that's not inching anymore. That is full-on sprinting. When you can't hold the people in authority over you accountable, what else do you call it? Please, tell me the word for it if it is not tyranny and it's not a dictatorship. I'm not the type of guy to do this. I'm not, typically speaking, an alarmist. I actually used to generally make fun of people who were calling Trump literally Hitler and, you know, being alarmist and stuff like that. But I am a history buff. I like history. And history doesn't always repeat itself, but it sure as hell rhymes sometimes. And in this case, this just reminds me so strongly of something called the Enabling Act of 1933. And that act gave Chancellor Adolf Hitler the power to make and enforce laws regardless of the other branches of government in Germany. Is this 100% exactly the same thing? No. Is it a way to completely undo the balance of power between our branches, just like they did back then? Yes. Yes, it is. And I am truly afraid of the consequences that we might face if this goes through. And speaking of unlimited power, I guess this is just kind of a quick aside because I really wasn't even planning on talking about this in this episode. But some of this scheming that Trump has done has finally come to fruition. Since the start of his term, Trump has been getting people to donate to his campaign fund. And that never really made much sense to me because he can't legally run again. And okay, he kind of flirted with it for a while in that oh so endearing way that he kind of jokes about breaking the law constantly. But now he has finally said he's not really looking at running for a third term. Awesome. Great. I'm glad. Thanks. But now it is finally starting to all come together and make sense. Elon Musk, the Musked one, has now backed off. He is kind of exiting the political scene in a huff, basically. He's not like outright calling Trump a big duty head or anything, but it's clear that the relationship is fractured, to say the least. And he has said that he doesn't plan on donating much money in the near future to political causes because he feels like he's given enough. Well, Trump's big stick that he wielded on Congress before was basically saying that if they didn't bow to his will and just do what he wants them to do, he's going to have them primaried out. And the idea was that he was going to have Muskie Boy do it. But with Elon Musk leaving, that kind of presents a problem for Trump. Except he has now built up an absolutely massive war chest. Last I checked, it was over $500 million, which I think is about what he spent on his entire presidential campaign this last time. So he's got a big war chest, and he can now use that to primary out any political opposition from within his own party. And the way he got that big war chest was by getting tech oligarchs to donate to him by giving them favors. Favors like, for example, this next provision that was snuck into the big, beautiful bill. It's on page 291 out of 1,116 pages in section 43201C. And it imposes a 10-year ban on state and local regulations of AI. Now, 45 states and territories have passed some kind of regulation on AI. And if this bill passes as it is written, those regulations will be null and void. The party of states' rights strikes again, baby. A bunch of attorneys general got together and wrote a letter saying that this was a bad idea and please reconsider trampling all over our states' rights because I don't like that, and I thought Republicans didn't either. Just to lay it out there, I'm kind of an accelerationist when it comes to AI. I believe that AI is, for all intents and purposes, eventually going to break our system as we know it. It's going to essentially, in some ways, kind of destroy capitalism. It's going to eventually leave billions and billions of people jobless. And there will not possibly be enough jobs to replace all of those jobs lost. It will be purely unsustainable in a real and true sense. Not unsustainable like, gee, people really aren't going to like this, but unsustainable in like billions and billions of people will be on the street if we keep our system the same as it is and still allow AI advancement. Once that happens, politicians are going to have to face this big, scary problem that has been staring us in the face for decades, that eventually there will be too many people for not enough jobs. There are going to be huge amounts of society that just cannot work, and not through any fault of their own, not because they're not hard workers, not because they're lazy or not educated or whatever. There just will not be enough jobs. Automation plays a part in that. Industrialization plays a part in that. And AI plays a huge part in that. Now, I don't know what the answer is. I don't know if the answer is universal basic income or like increased social security or massive public works projects that the government funds. I really have no idea. But I do know that regardless, AI is an inevitability. And we will have to face down this problem sooner rather than later. I would personally rather not march against progress. And I would rather deal with this problem now so that our children don't have to. If there is one thing I have learned from previous generations, it's that putting off problems onto your children is not the answer. On the other hand, we are currently sitting at the cusp of the misinformation age. AI can generate video and audio and even entire movies. It's genuinely impressive stuff. I'm going to put a clip in here. You can see exactly what I'm talking about.
In shocking news, J.K. Rowling's yacht sank with her on board after being attacked by orcas off the coast of Turkey.
Yeah, see, if I was not told ahead of time that was AI, I wouldn't have believed it. Seriously, impressive stuff. But it can also be used for great evil. For example, and I don't want to be too graphic or vile or whatever, but South Carolina was all set to pass a law that you couldn't use AI to generate pornographic material of AI models that looked like minors. I mean, again, I know it's a tough subject. I don't even like to mention it, but this is the kind of stuff that is going to be blocked by this bill. States will not have the right to say you are not allowed to do that kind of vile, evil stuff. Or if your state, for example, wanted to say you weren't allowed to take a bunch of pictures of your neighbor and then deep fake a video of them committing some kind of crime, well, too bad. Sorry. You're going to be allowed to do that if this bill passes. We are not ready to face the new reality of misinformation that is going to be upon us because of lack of AI regulation. We are not ready to handle that as a society. I am telling you, I can show you that there is already now an ability to make footage that is indistinguishable from real life. And if we don't have any kind of laws or regulation against that, then people will absolutely use that for evil. They just will. I am generally speaking completely for the advancement of AI tech. I really am. I think it's awesome stuff. I think it's useful stuff. I think it's life-saving stuff. But I also understand that it can be horribly, horribly abused and needs to be, in some ways at least, regulated. But instead, they are just slipping this completely unrelated to the budget provision into this bill that actively fights against states' rights, which is the thing that Republicans have always said they're for. So instead of following their ideology, instead of following their morals, they are slipping in provisions to appease oligarch technocrats that puckered up for the big orange butt. All right, it is time to switch gears now. Not because we have covered everything in this big, beautiful bill. It's over 1,100 pages. There's stuff in there that we won't know about until after the bill has passed. But there are other pressing matters to attend to, like, for example, the White House waging war on higher education. Now, I have talked a little bit about how the Trump administration has attempted to essentially perform like a hostile takeover, basically, on some preeminent universities in the United States. Like, for example, Columbia University. They totally caved. They gave in to most, if not all, of Trump's demands almost immediately and in embarrassing fashion. Well, more recently, they set their sights on Harvard, and Harvard said no at them. They came at Harvard with a list of truly insane demands. It was basically how they were supposed to start like policing the student body, how they were supposed to change the curriculums. They were supposed to match more closely with like this current administration's like personal beliefs on things. And they were asking the Trump administration to basically have a fairly strict control over like on-campus politics and, you know, teachers that were allowed, things they taught in classes, a bunch of wild and like crazy stuff. Government overreach to its ludicrous and illogical extreme. And when Harvard told them to rightfully just go pound sand, we're not going to do it, the Trump team turned into basically a crazy ex-girlfriend and absolutely just crashed the hell out. So first, he froze literally billions of dollars of grant money going to Harvard and specifically research at Harvard. So this is for, medical advancements, things that benefit everybody in the country. Then he said they were going to try and take away Harvard's tax-exempt status. And now, finally, this week, he has ordered that Harvard isn't allowed to have international students anymore because they were, and I quote here, fostering violence, anti-Semitism, and coordinating with the Chinese Communist Party on its campus. So, first of all, let's talk about the freezing of the funds and why Trump is actually doing this and why he is pretending to do this. So, just to cover kind of the general argument that they're making, they're saying that the big issue is mostly that these campuses, and that includes Harvard, are basically fostering anti-Semitism. Now, for this particular topic, I have to kind of dip my toes into the conflict that's going on over in the Gaza Strip and against Palestine. And again, I just want to give my usual disclaimer that I'm not telling you which side is particularly right or wrong. It's a complicated issue. There's a lot of nuance. And honestly, sometimes there really are no right answers. Okay. But I digress. The issue is that for some reason, this war in Gaza has turned into a left versus right issue in American politics. It really has almost nothing at all to do with us, other than just, we provide foreign aid to Israel. So I mostly just find it really incredibly frustrating that this issue, out of all of the issues, is turning into some huge cultural wedge that's used to divide us. But here we are. A lot of campuses, because they typically speaking have more people that are inclined to be left-leaning, and I'll talk about that in a little bit, have had a lot of protests in support of Palestine. So Harvard initially was actually willing to play ball to some extent. They did extensive reviews into their own like anti-Semitism policies, came up with like new definitions of anti-Semitism to try and be more broad and make sure that more things were kind of disallowed per campus ethos. And they tried to find places where they came up short, where after doing a review, they decided that, yeah, we could have done better here and we want to change some things. So they released a full report showing basically not much, but they did put in serious effort into researching the issue, finding out if the claim was accurate, and basically just ensuring a fair campus experience for everybody, regardless of ethnicity or national origin. But what they would not do is infringe on their students' rights to free speech or let their own free speech as, faculty and staff be infringed. And that is basically the actual crux of the issue here, because Harvard would not allow the Trump administration to infringe on their free speech or the free speech of their students. They had their funding frozen. But that's not the only financial hit that Trump wants them to take. As I mentioned at the start of this segment, he has now said multiple times that he wants to take away Harvard's tax-exempt status. Harvard, along with other prestigious universities in the United States, enjoy tax-exempt status because of the great amount of good that they do for not just the United States, but the entire world. And it was not so long ago that Harvard was synonymous with higher education, elite research, the greatest minds in law and medicine. Harvard, Stanford, MIT are globally recognized names, and they are always considered among the best universities in the entire world. I mean, Oxford basically kind of wishes it was Harvard, if you catch my drift. Harvard has been around since before the United States existed. I mean, it is truly a foundational aspect to our country. And to attack it is, frankly, disgraceful. But Harvard is given tax-exempt status because its value to this country goes far beyond just a monetary value. And the added value of the research done by Harvard and the added value of the research gained by tax-free donations to Harvard far outweighs the cost. And yet, because Harvard is refusing to bow down to the orange megalomaniac's will, he has threatened time and time again to take away their tax-exempt status. But there's two big problems with that. The first is just that, now I know he has done a lot of things that he just, can't do, right? But this is something that he literally does not have the power or capability of doing. He cannot do it. It's not that he should not do it or he would not do it. He just literally cannot do it. He cannot write an executive order that says Harvard is no longer tax exempt and we're going to charge them back taxes for whatever. He can't even touch that. He has nothing to do with taxing Harvard whatsoever. The only authority to change tax-exempt status at all in this country lays entirely with the IRS. And specifically, only after a thorough investigation as to whether or not the entity that they are considering removing the tax-exempt status from is no longer eligible per the requirements. Which brings us to problem two, which is that it is actually strictly illegal for the president to order an IRS investigation of any specific entity or person or corporation or university. Now, is he going to face any kind of consequences whatsoever for blatantly breaking the law yet again by demanding that Harvard's tax-exempt status be revoked? No, probably not. I mean, a 30-second interaction with the average Trump supporter will tell you that they don't really care if he follows the law or not. So I don't expect there's going to be any kind of a huge outcry or anything, but I'm just here to tell you that, yes, that is illegal. He cannot do that. But then finally, that brings us to the most recent news, which is that on Thursday of this week, the Department of Homeland Security, looking at you, Kristi, Noem, and yes, we will be talking about you in just a minute here, revoked Harvard's certification in the Student and Exchange Visitor Program. So what that means is that Harvard is not allowed to have any foreign students enrolled at the university. And any foreign students that are currently enrolled at the university would need to immediately transfer. So just to get this out of the way, yes, Harvard basically immediately sued to get an injunction, and they pretty much immediately got it. A judge said, no, you can't do this. It is temporarily halted, and they're going to be having a full legal battle about whether or not this was a rightful revocation or not, starting on May 29th. So just stay tuned for that, and I will keep you updated. Basically, the argument is that Harvard is saying that this is clearly and obviously retaliation for them not letting Trump grab them by the First Amendment. And the Trump team is basically saying something about communists and China because they lost the plot. They forgot that this whole thing was supposed to be about anti-Semitism to begin with. And so I don't know. They brought up violence, the Chinese Communist Party. They're basically grasping at straws. I think they just, they got a Mad Libs and they filled it with like Republican buzzwords, and they forgot that McCarthyism went out of style a while ago. And that's where we're at. So why did the Trump admin specifically want to ban Harvard from hosting foreign students? I mean, that seems kind of odd. Well, it was basically because Trump wanted to hit them in the wallet again. And just like a quick aside here, if the Trump admin ever does pretty much anything that isn't like immediately apparent on its face exactly why they're doing it, it's about money. That's really like the only thing he understands. That's the only thing he thinks about. That is the way that he sees every single interaction is basically a quid pro quo. Who's getting the money? Whoever is getting the money is getting the power. And that's that. But anyway, foreign students are extraordinarily lucrative for universities. See, domestic students get all kinds of discounts on their tuition and housing and stuff like that. You get in-state discounts, you get scholarship discounts that sometimes have like negotiated reduced rates. International students don't get any of that. International students have to pay absolutely top dollar in every sense of the word for everything, for tuition, for housing, for absolutely everything. International students are much, much more lucrative for universities to have. They make a ton of money off of that. And for what it's worth, the international student body at Harvard is like 25% of the student body. So all of a sudden, a fourth of their students were suddenly getting kicked out, basically. This is a pretty big deal. I mean, that is a pretty massive deal for Harvard and for their cash flow. Like I said, I mean, this particular scheme of lawfare is currently on pause for now, and we will have to see where it goes. But the immense amount of damage that the Trump administration is doing to our country's higher education system is frankly embarrassing and unforgivable. I kind of referenced this before, but the right has, for a very long time now, complained about how universities are basically just breeding grounds for leftists. How professors are just totally left-wing, and they always teach their ideologies to students who always end up coming out left-wing too. So to that, I want to say basically two things. One party is actively waging war on academia. They are doing everything they can to make life harder for academics throughout the country. They are slashing research budgets. They are attacking the moral character of administrators and professors. So why in the world would these administrators and professors and professionals and researchers and scientists want to be a part of that party? Even if they were by nature sort of, more fundamentally conservative. Why in the world would they want to support the party that is, for all intents and purposes, like robbing them blind? And then second of all, this This actually sort of reminds me of football. And just bear with me here for a second because I'm a huge NFL fan. So sometimes in the past, teams would get real butthurt over another team running up the score, just scoring as many points as they can, even after it was clear that that team was going to win. The common response to that was always, if you don't like it, then stop them from scoring. You don't like getting scored on that much? Just play better. Conservatives, I'm talking to you here eye to eye, okay? We're on the same page. And I'm telling you, if you don't like academia and people involved in higher education flocking to the left, play better. Make better policies. Stop writing bills with your feelings and focus on the facts. Go be a professor. Go share your ideology. Convince students that your way of thinking is better. It's not some kind of unfair playing field. Everybody has the same shot at entering academia. You just need to do better. Okay, so for this next story, we need to rewind just a little bit. You guys remember the Venezuelans that were rounded up, accused of being in Tren de Aragua, aka TDA, and then sent on a secret plane to El Salvador to rot in a terrorist prison cell hell for who knows how long? This is about that, but I promise we are not going to just relitigate the whole thing. I have made my views on it pretty clear. I have multiple episodes about it. I have spelled the timeline out and kind of explained exactly what happened, why I think it's unlawful, yada, yada, yada. This segment is actually a little more clandestine. I'm talking about the national intelligence agencies. So the reason that the Trump administration says they are able to skirt the law and basically act like a dictator is because they have invoked the Alien Enemies Act. And I've talked before about the Alien Enemies Act and how you basically have to be at war to invoke it. You have to be under some kind of like actual official invasion by a foreign nation. And that invasion has to actually be directed by, the foreign government for it to actually be war. Now, there are some other issues about invoking it as well. Like there actually does have to be a clear and present danger if you don't invoke it, essentially. In pursuit of having better legal standing for invoking the Alien Enemies Act, the Trump administration ordered the National Intelligence Council to release a report about the link between TDA and the Venezuelan government and or President Maduro, who's the president of Venezuela. The National Intelligence Council released 2 reports about the issue, actually. The first report was released back in February, and it said that essentially, there was no link between the street gang and the government of Venezuela. They were not sending these people here as an invasion. They were unrelated. But the second report, the second report was released a little later in the year, and that one was a bombshell because it said that, no, I'm sorry. It actually said the exact same thing as the first report. See, it's funny that analysis was taken into account by the CIA, the FBI, NSA, and they all came to the same basic conclusion. This is not an invasion. It is a street gang, and they have nothing to do with the Venezuelan government. That's just not going to do, because if it's not an invasion and they don't have anything to do with the government, Trump can't use the Alien Enemies Act, and that's not okay. So they really, really needed the intelligence agencies to support that this was actually an invasion and that they were somehow linked to the Venezuelan government. That just wasn't going to do. See, they really needed the intelligence agencies to support that this was an invasion, an actual invasion, sponsored in part by the Venezuelan government. Because if it wasn't, then they would probably get shut down when it came to using the Alien Enemies Act. as they have been. So, Tulsi Gabbard, who is the director of national intelligence, had her right-hand man, Joe Kent, write some emails. And in those emails, he pressured Michael Collins, who was the acting head of the National Intelligence Council, and other intelligence officials to basically, reconsider. Like, hey, if you really think about it, it just, it makes sense that these paisanos were sent over by Maduro, right? So, come on, do me a solid here, Go ahead and rewrite up some reports, okay? Just make sure you use your common sense this time and don't let your stupid brain get in the way, and maybe we can all get out of here in one piece. Capiche? Well, Michael Collins said no. In my somewhat limited research on him, I found that he has a pretty long history of working on some extremely tough issues in a nonpartisan way. That's one quote I saw about him. And that he has a high level of integrity. And that's obviously not what the Trump administration is looking for. So in a frankly stunning display of corruption, they got rid of him. And I think the odds are pretty good that they are going to end up finding some lackey to fulfill exactly the role that they want them to. It kind of reminds me of what was going on, what seems like a lifetime ago, but was actually only a few short months. You guys remember that corruption scandal with the mayor of New York, right? And Danielle Sassoon and what was it, Hagen Scotton? They kind of stood up to the Trump administration and said, "We're not going to drop these charges. This guy is guilty, and it would go against our integrity to do so." And I remember Scotton wrote that that amazing letter. It ended with, "I expect you will find someone who is enough of a fool or enough of a coward to file your motion, but it was never going to be me." Man, that really does feel like a lifetime ago. Seriously. But anyway, I guess eventually they probably will find somebody who is enough of a fool or enough of a coward to say that this is actually an invasion and to disregard the truth and do whatever Trump wants. And actually, that brings me to my next point. I guess I'm kind of breaking two of my usual rules this week, because I already dipped my toe into the Israel-Palestine conflict, which I usually don't particularly like talking about. And second, I'm about to make a pop culture reference and compare Trump to a movie villain. And I swear it's a reasonable comparison. But I always used to make fun of people who always compared the political climate to like Harry Potter. Like, please watch another movie, read another book, for God's sake. But I swear, Donald Trump is reminding me more and more of Emperor Palpatine. I swear to God. You guys remember episode 2? Jar Jar went up in front of the Galactic Senate and he was like, "Dellow Fellegates." And he put forward a motion to give Chancellor Palpatine emergency powers due to basically a manufactured crisis. And those powers allowed him to completely overlook the Supreme Court and Congress, or I'm sorry, the Galactic Senate, and basically create an army of 20,000 ICE agents. I mean, I'm sorry, I keep getting my wires crossed. Create an army of 100,000 clone troopers to fight this war. Also, he could fight China and Tren de Aragua. I'm pretty sure that's how it went. Anyway, seriously, you need to look at everything from a 20,000 foot view here. People tend to kind of just go through life with their very narrow perspective, and it is very easy to miss the forest for the trees. if you are listening to anything that I say in this entire episode and maybe this entire series, please understand this. This is not about immigration. Everything that's going on right now, the declaration of an invasion, abusing the Supreme Court, it's not about immigration. It's just not. The Founding Fathers, they tried to walk a tightrope. They wanted a strong, centralized federal government, at least many of them did, but they didn't want a king. So they set up the three branches of government, co-equal. But they also realized that there was true danger in bureaucracy. So they allowed for one narrow way in which the executive branch could take charge and supersede their powers if necessary. In national emergencies, the president is allowed to do certain things unilaterally, bypassing Congress. These are, for the most part, wartime powers that are for use in true national emergencies. It's no coincidence that, of course, Donald Trump has declared the most amount of national emergencies in the first 100 days of office out of any president, because he wants to abuse that tactic. He wants to be able to enact these insane tariffs. He wanted to be able to deport people without due process. And that's why this actually all relates back to national intelligence. National intelligence agencies are supposed to be apolitical. They're supposed to be completely objective and above the winds of politics. Democrats, Republicans, it doesn't matter. The truth is the truth, and national security is national security. One of our greatest errors in recent history was when Dick Cheney decided to basically pick and choose between what sort of intelligence he was going to take seriously. And that's what got us embroiled in a forever war in the Middle East, which is a huge stain on our nation's legacy. So when the director of national intelligence can kind of wink, wink, nudge, nudge her way into getting intelligence agencies to basically drum up fake news that aligns with what dear leader wants to make policy, that's dangerous. And it's not just dangerous. It is genuinely bordering on dictatorship. Intelligence agencies are willing to call TDA a foreign invasion. Where are they going to stop? What if you have intelligence agencies directed to start going after union members because they're worried about unions drumming up a general strike and how that's going to look really bad for the sitting president? What if they decide to go after our allies? Oh, what's that? The CIA just released a report that Canada is about to mount an incursion on the U.S.? Oh, okay. Well, I guess we better launch a preemptive strike. What's that? Is this about the whole 51st state thing? Oh, no way. See, the intelligence agencies are the ones telling us that this is a problem. So our hands are tied now, right? The intelligence agencies told us there's a danger here and we have to do something about it. So the fact that Tulsi Gabbard and, by extension, Donald Trump are willing to abuse the intelligence agencies, not just in the way that we have historically done so by, overthrowing foreign governments or whatever. That's small time stuff. They are now willing to abuse intelligence agencies and bully them into coming up with fake reports about people who are here in this country, frequently legally. That's a big problem. A report came out recently that I think like 50 of the people that were removed and sent to El Salvador were here entirely legally. It's not like they were breaking the law by sneaking into our border or whatever. They were here legally. They didn't do anything wrong. They just happened to look like the wrong type of person. They had a tattoo that matched up with Trump's preconceived notions. And for that, They were sent to a gulag. So I don't care if you say I have Trump derangement syndrome for calling out outright corruption and evil. I really don't. I only ask that you take the scales off of your eyes, wake up, and just look at what's going on around you. Ask if you would be okay with this if a Democrat was doing it. Seriously, please. And if you wouldn't, I need you to just reconsider where you're at politically right now, because we are in dangerous and deep waters. All right. So that concludes the news portion of this episode. And now I am so delighted to open up our newest segment, A Cabinet Full of Cuckoos. And as I teased a little earlier on, this week we are going to be talking about Kristi Noem, baby, aka Ice Barbie. Kristi Noem is the head of the Department of Homeland Security. Boy, oh boy, does she have a bit of a checkered past. Some of it involves doing really goofy and dumb stuff while in office. Some of it involves lying about meeting foreign officials. Some of it involves shooting her dog. So, without further ado, let's dive in, baby. The first thing I want to talk about is actually pretty recently, and it was kind of one of the inspirations for this segment, actually. Kristi Noem was at a Senate hearing, actually just on May 20th. And in it, she was asked to describe what habeas corpus is. And as astute viewers may know, we have talked about habeas corpus here. It's not some ethereal, mystical, arcane knowledge that nobody understands. Your friendly neighborhood podcaster has a grasp on what habeas corpus is. The Department of Homeland Security should especially understand what habeas corpus is. This was Kristi Noem's response. A constitutional right that the president has to be able to remove people from this country. No, that's not right. What does that even mean? If you suspended that right, then wouldn't you be saying that you don't have the right to remove people from this country anymore? But look, that's obviously looking much deeper into it than she ever did. Anybody who watches this podcast knows that habeas corpus is producing the body. It's basically the right that everybody in this country has to not just be held indefinitely. They have the right to appear in court before a judge, et cetera, et cetera. And it really has absolutely nothing to do with deporting people. I mean, basically at all. But this topic came up because Stephen Miller decided to run his mouth. And yes, I'll be coming after Stephen Miller at some point too in this segment. So I guess they decided to ask Kristi Noem what she thought about it, because she is vocally in support of doing whatever it is that President Trump wants to do. So yes, the head of the Department of Homeland Security does not understand one of the most basic legal concepts, aka the Great Writ. And yes, that is seriously a problem. But that's not the only problem she's faced. It would be an awful short segment if it was. No, I actually want to talk about some of the stuff that she did while she was governor of South Dakota. So back when COVID was in its heyday, she was one of the first big name politicians to start talking about how great hydroxychloroquine would be to fight COVID. Which is an anti-malarial drug that doesn't help fight COVID, but can produce fatal cardiac arrhythmia. So I'm not entirely sure exactly, but I wouldn't be surprised if she definitely got some people killed because she hates science and medicine and just wanted to tout whatever the most popular conspiracy theory was at the time. And speaking of COVID, I've talked before a little bit about how I understand that we did not have a great response to COVID. One example of us not having a great response to COVID is how in September of 2020, when it was surging in South Dakota, Kristi Noem announced that she was going to take $5 million that was granted to the state as like COVID relief, and she was going to spend that on tourism. And not only that, but actually she used 819,000 of those dollars, so almost a fifth of the entire money that she set aside for it, to have the state's Department of Tourism run a 30-second commercial on Fox News during the 2020 Republican National Convention that she was narrating. So it was, she basically used it as a political ad for herself. She spent like a fifth of the money set to give COVID relief to the state to make a commercial for herself to play at the RNC. She also was actually responsible for some pretty interesting and important laws being passed. For example, in 2021, she announced that she was sending members of the South Dakota National Guard to the Texas border with Mexico. In September of 2021, the Center for Public Integrity sued the South Dakota National Guard and the U.S. Department of Defense in the federal district court to obtain documents about the deployment and donation from billionaire Willis Johnson to fund it. In 2022, the National Defense Authorization Act banned National Guard members from crossing state borders to perform duties paid for by private donors. Thank you, Kristi Noem. Thank you for helping a law be written to prevent you from doing incredibly stupid and dangerous things with our National Guard. For somebody who is, I guess, considered like a fiscal hawk for some reason, she had some interesting spending habits. In November of 2021, she spent $68,000 of taxpayer dollars on imported rugs from India, chandeliers, and a sauna for her governor's mansion. This one's one of my favorites, actually. On November 18th, 2019, Kristi Noem released a meth awareness campaign named Meth, We're On It. The campaign was widely mocked, and Noem was criticized for spending $449,000 of public funds while hiring an out-of-state advertising agency from Minnesota to lead the project. She defended the campaign and said that it was successful in raising awareness, and I really recommend you guys look up this ad. It's weird. It's weird. It has a bunch of people going around saying, meth, I'm on it. And the idea is not that they're saying that they're on meth, but saying that they're on like being aware of meth. I don't know. I don't get it. But I guess if you didn't know about meth before, you do now. So thank you. Thank you, Kristi Noem. Here's probably what she's, I guess, most well known for. And I guess I kind of saved the best for last because she's written a couple of books. And her most recent book was some kind of fictionalized, in some ways, autobiography. But this story is true. And I want to just read you an excerpt from an article that I read about this. First of all, just some backstory here. She shot her dog. It's kind of messed up, but this dog was, I guess, supposed to be a hunting dog, and it wasn't very good at hunting, and it was like rowdy, like jumped around a lot, and so she shot it. It was 14 months old. It's pretty messed up, but okay. Here's this excerpt because that's not the only family animal she shot. After Noem made the death march to her farm's gravel pit where she shot Cricket, she was apparently still in an uncontrollable rage. Walking back up to the yard, I spotted our billy goat, Noem wrote. The nameless goat's only sin in that moment was being in Noem's field of view. In the book, Noem tried to justify her snap decision to kill the goat by writing that it loved to chase her children and would knock them down and butt them, leaving them terrified. The animal also had a wretched smell. But apparently none of that had been a big enough problem to do anything about it. Not until Noem got angry enough to kill a dog and decided she needed to kill again. Noem said she dragged the goat to the gravel pit, tied him to a post, and shot at him, but evidently missed. My shot was off and I needed one more shell to finish the job, she wrote. She studiously avoided saying that she wounded the goat with the first shot, but that's the implication. My shot was off and I needed one more shell to finish the job. Not wanting him to suffer, I hustled back across the pasture to the pickup, grabbed another shell, hurried back to the gravel pit, and put him down. First of all, that's fucked up. Like, I'm sorry. I apologize if you had children listening. She shot her family's dog and then goat because it smelled bad. And second of all, she had it tied to a post and she still missed. Like, who let her hold a gun? How did she miss, dude? How did she not kill it in one shot? That is so messed up. And I'm sorry for laughing about it because honestly, it is horrific. But I can't even believe that like this is where we're at. The head of the Department of Homeland Security doesn't know what habeas corpus is. Shot her family dog. Shot and missed a goat that she tied up for smelling bad, and then had to kill it with a second shot. Like, what? This is kind of what I was talking about when I said cartoonishly evil. Like, that's horrible. That is a horrible thing to do. That's a horrible person. Okay, horribleness aside, this is actually the funniest part. This thing I'm about to say, because she kind of like played it off as like an accident. Here's an excerpt from the book. I remember when I met with North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un. I'm sure he underestimated me, having no clue about my experience staring down little tyrants. I'd been a children's pastor after all. Dealing with foreign leaders takes resolve, preparation, and determination. So here's the thing. She never met with Kim Jong-un, ever. And then after they questioned her about it, her spokesperson said that it shouldn't have been included. It wasn't supposed to be in the book. And okay, actually, here was her official response. She was asked by CBS if she had actually met with Kim Jong-un, the leader of North Korea. And she said, "I'm not going to talk about my specific meetings with world leaders. I'm just not going to do that. This anecdote shouldn't have been in the book, and as soon as it was brought to my attention, I made sure that it was adjusted." Which, yes, she actually had it removed out of, like, later editions, but was she writing fan fiction about it, or, like, what? What was going on? How do you accidentally write that in a memoir? It just snuck in. You accidentally wrote that you met with somebody who you never, ever met ever. And not just like somebody, not like, oh yeah, my neighbor Joe. No, Kim Jong-un, the leader of North Korea. How do you write that? Oh, and that's not the only thing, actually. She also wrote that Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, asked her to meet with him, and she said no, because I don't even remember what she said. Oh, no, I'm sorry. It was because he made a very pro-Hamas and anti-Israel comment to the press. But the French government actually came out and said no, they had never asked to meet with her, and they had no record of ever scheduling any kind of a meeting with her. So, like, what is happening? Why is she writing fan fiction about meeting other world leaders? That's just weird. Like, okay, obviously shooting your dog and shooting a goat because it smells bad is weird, but like, that's just cringe, man. There's no other word for it. Why are you writing that about yourself in a book? Why is it accidentally there to begin with? It never should have been there. What do you mean it was an accident? It shouldn't have happened. What? Oh my gosh. Okay, so yeah, that's the end of the episode. I don't know. That's it. That's all I got. Thank you guys for tuning in. I really, really appreciate it. I hope you had some laughs. I hope you learned something. I definitely did in doing research for this episode. Share it around. There is a huge problem with most of YouTube being overrun with like far right people who are all about MAGA and the Trump administration. That's a big part of why I wanted to make this channel, was to add in some competing voices. I think people deserve to be able to hear multiple perspectives, and there's just not a lot of people like me out there right now. So if you like my work, share it around. I would be honored. If you don't like my work, please just share it anyway, man. I don't know. Just do it. I am on Spotify now. So check me out on Spotify if you love hearing me, but don't feel like keeping YouTube open all the time. I'm there. I got you. Hit me up in the comments section. I would love to hear from you. I would love to hear your opinions, or if there's anything you think I should be talking about that you haven't heard about from other media outlets, please let me know. Thank you for your time. I love you, and I'll see you soon.